All right, let's see if this works now. See if anyone's able to join. Sorry, everyone, for the issues. I am trying to delete the old stream, but it won't even let me go back in for some reason, which I don't understand why, but I'm trying to fix it. Hello, sorry about the issues, everyone. I don't know what's up. I'm going to have to look into canceling the other stream. It just won't even let me work on it. I am so sorry about the issues. It won't let me cancel the old one. I am still learning everything with YouTube. So hopefully I will be able to fix that. Hello, Jamie, Henry, and what's up, man? Hello, good to see you. Glad you're here. And Blueberry Comics. Yeah, it makes no sense. I don't understand how to fix it. How to stop it. It just won't stop. Yeah, it won't let me delete forever, which is really strange. I see Jacob Sweet. This one is working. Revan, it works now. Unlikely ally. Hello. Can you guys hear me fine? Is there an issue with my audio? I'm just want to make sure everything's working properly. So if you guys have any questions at all, anything book related, please leave it down in the. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments, and I will be able to try to answer them if I can. I have some topics planned if we run out of questions, but I'm not sure that we actually will run out of questions. So let's see. Let's see what everyone's thinking. I'll give you guys a second if you need it to type any questions. All right. Thank you, Blue Pig, for being here. Thank you, Unlikely Ally, and Revan 1207. Revan, you'll have to let me know. I saw you reading some books recently on your Goodreads, so you'll have to let me know your thoughts on some of them. First question from The Blue Pig. Do you prefer Aaron Alston's X-Wing books or Michael Stackpole's? Interesting question. So I would say I prefer... So they're very different. Michael Stackpole is a much more traditional type author with the way he was writing his X-Wing books. They're much more straight up novels. And then Aaron was much more Aaron was much more humorous with it. And I would say Aaron's I enjoyed his humor, but it wasn't the best. It wasn't what I loved. So I would say, yeah, I would say I like Michael's a little bit better, and also I feel like the story had more of an impact. But Starfighters of Adramar is a fantastic novel, and there is some background history of Aaron Alston had no time to prep for his first 3 X-Wing books. He had to just write them instantly, and he had no prep time, and it was crazy. Whereas he had a lot of time at the he had a lot of time on Starfighters of Adramar, which is, I think, a better novel. So, yeah. I like Michael Stackpole's better, and I like Michael Stackpole's fantasy novels as well. I like his writing outside of Star Wars as well. I haven't read anything of Aaron Alston, but he didn't do too much outside of Star Wars that I know about. All right, I have Anna saying, hi, what's your Goodreads, Jonathan? If you look under my name, Jonathan Cohn, that's where my Goodreads is. It's the easiest place to find me. On my about, if you go to my YouTube page and you go to my about section, there is a link to my Goodreads page. Fair warning, I do not accept all friend requests. You can follow me. I cannot promise I will accept a friend request because I just have a ton of friends on there, and it's too much to follow everyone's reading on there. So I might not, but you can at least follow me on Goodreads. Let's see the next one. Revan 1207 says, well, I'm really enjoying Eye of the World so far. I'm already somewhat tempted to grab a set of the whole series, so we'll see if I do that. You will be really busy for a long time if you read all the Wheel of Time at once. I split it up where I would read a Wheel of Time book and then spend a couple of weeks reading other books, and then I'd go back and read a Wheel of Time book and then go to other books. So I split it up. So it actually took me about 2 years to read the whole Wheel of Time, but that's because I was reading a lot in the middle. But there were some times between, like, I read books 5 and 6 together, and I read books like 7, 8, 9 together, and then I read like 12, 13, 14 all in one summer. So I read them kind of close. So I totally can get the desire to read them together, but I really enjoy them. I particularly enjoy the beginning and the middle, and then the end is my favorite. The last 4 books are just superb, just absolutely superb. So I'm glad you are really liking it, and I'm glad you were able to get into it. Let's see. Next comment is Blueberry Comics. Shire, Two Rivers, or Shadesville, the Shannara one. They're also similar. For some reason, the Shady Vale is not really explored in Terry Brooks's in his Shannara series. He just doesn't take the time to do it, which is really, really sad. I feel like he should have explored it more. Two Rivers, we get a lot of. I like it, but I feel like the Shire is the most developed. It's the one I have the most feeling for. So probably I'd have to give it to the Shire. Unlikely Ally says, "Oh, Wheel of Time is probably my overall favorite." Revan, yeah, it is. It is really good. It's my favorite. Although there are some other series that I'm reading that could potentially take the list once they are finished because they're so good. Jacob says, so I'm reading Darth Plagueis, and it's just really tough to get through. A lot of exposition. Do you have advice on getting through a tougher book or one you don't really enjoy but want to finish? So first of all, I'll say there is a certain point that the slog in Darth Plagueis ends. As soon as something happens, you're going to feel like, okay, this thing is going fast. But the beginning portion is pretty slow. I would say I have a very specific goal. I have to read a certain number of books, A, for Goodreads, B, for my personal self, C, for the YouTube channel, because I have to keep the videos coming and the book reviews. And then D, I also try to read a lot in a lot of different genres, and I feel bad DNFing books, and so I just say I am going to plow through it. I have 3 days. I am going to finish this book, darn it, and if I'm not enjoying it, then that's too bad. I'm going to finish it. I really don't not enjoy that many books. Really, I read about 100 books a year. Only about 4 or 5 I don't enjoy, and even then, they're usually not incredibly long books, so I'm able to read them really fast. So I wouldn't I would just plow through it, and then if you just don't like it, just move on to something else afterwards, but still finish it if you can, because you want to at least find out what happens. And it actually is quite a cool story towards the end. I really do like it. And he does have a lot of worldview there. So world building, I should say, not worldview, world building there. So next comment is from Blueberry Comics, same unlikely ally, but my favorite book overall would probably be The Body, the Stand By Me. I don't know that one. I'll have to look into that book series. Do you know who the author is on those, so I can write that down? I have a few more comments from Joanna. Says, "Okay, thanks." Revan says, "Oh, and a follow-up to my question from the last stream about Lovecraft." Yes, I remember that. A lot of his stories can be found on his website if you'd like to give a couple of them a try before buying a physical copy. That's a good point. I could do that. The problem is that I don't like reading anything that's not a physical book. I have to have a physical book in my hands, which is why I have so many on my shelves. Then there's several shelves you can't see. But maybe if I'm hesitant, maybe I should do that, read a couple of his short stories on his website. So that's a good idea. So I might get into that. Unlikely Ally says, "Great choice, Blueberry. I like a lot of Stephen King." Oh, okay, so that's who you were talking about. Stephen King. That makes sense. Blue Pig says, "Is there any small-scale sci-fi series that are really good that you could recommend? I'm a slow reader, so I can't really get into any other big universes like Star Wars." Okay, so I actually just read some Timothy Zahn books that I really loved. One of them is one of my favorite books of the year, and that video will coming out in a couple of weeks. That is Manta's Gift. Boy, is that an amazing novel. And Timothy Zahn wrote a lot of standalone novels like that, like Manta's Gift, Angel Mask, Icarus Hunt, all of them superb, all standalones for the most part. And then he wrote some other series. If you like his Cobra series is very much classic sci-fi. If you want that like 80s feeling for your sci-fi books. But if you want like a more modern tone on a sci-fi series, his Conqueror series is really excellent. I really like his Conquerors books. And then also, if you're looking for something longer than that, like a really big like concept like that, but not as huge as Star Wars, I would go with Kevin Anderson's Saga of the Seven Sons. They're not the most amazing books I've ever read, but they're quite entertaining, I would say. They're quite entertaining. So yes, I would recommend those if you're looking for a sci-fi universe that's not too big. Blue Pig also says, "I would get into Trek if I had the shelf space, reading speed, and wallet." Right. I've spent years collecting my Star Trek novels, and I still have not even scratched the surface. I have about 100 of them, and there are about 800 Star Trek novels. So it will take me a long time to catch up, if I ever do. Playboy Pace. Hello, Playboy Pace. "What is the best Star Wars book that features Vader?" Interesting. All right. So if we're talking in the EU, we have the book called Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader. Vader is excellent in that book. A lot of big YouTubers like Star Wars Theory talk about that one as well. I thought Vader isn't really the center. Like, he's the main character, but he's actually not in it as much as you'd think. And yet it's still a really good book. That book does some things really right and actually has some interesting connections to Kenobi that I won't spoil. But I would also add that in the canon, you have books like Lords of the Sith and also Tarkin. So Lords of the Sith features Vader and Palpatine. And then you also have Tarkin, which features Tarkin and Vader. And those are both excellent books that feature the Darth Vader. So I would recommend those. Blueberry Comics says, "Whoa, just jumped. Yeah, Revan, I also got online the first 3 books, but I accidentally ordered them 4 times, so it wasn't fun. Still have some copies. I haven't gifted yet. LOL." That's I have done that one time where I ordered something twice by accident. It doesn't happen often. Carcass288 says, "Yo, hello. Thank you for joining us." The Blue Pig says, "Plagiarist is a lot better if you've read all the books that has its connections to." That's also a good point. He also says, "I had to restart it myself once." Yeah. I did too. I am the same way. I read about the first 50 pages, gave up, and then I tried again, and boy, I just plowed through it. Blue Pig says, "And a year later, restarted it and zoomed through it." I'm right with you. And Hopper, hello, says, as a man who reads a lot of franchise stuff, do you think franchise work suffers from things like having to write within the established worlds and guidelines and authors writing as just a job, etc.? I will say this is a yes and no answer. So I'm a huge media tie-in fiction fan, and my family always razzes me on this because they're like, Italian fiction? No, media tie-in fiction. I love it because it is franchises that have movies and TV shows and video games, and then you have novels that supplement them. And I like it because it becomes easier to jump into. It becomes easy to convince people to read these books because, hey, it's a Star Wars book. I like Star Wars. Or, hey, I like Red Dead Redemption. There's Red Dead Redemption novels. Or, I like CSI. I want to read CSI. So there's things like that that I think get audiences in. And you can be hampered by world building stuff sometimes, but not often. For example, Timothy Zahn just wrote the Ascendancy trilogy. I'll point out Lesser Evil, the big massive book for the canon. In this trilogy, he completely goes off the map. It's still a media tie-in book, and it still fits in Star Wars, but he's able to do a ton of his own world building and mythology and history, and he's able to go completely other directions. And it's such a fun trilogy. Like, this would read fine if you weren't a Star Wars fan. You just wanted an excellent sci-fi trilogy. This would work. So this proves, in my opinion, that I think that it doesn't hamper it. Now, it can. There are times where authors, let it hamper them, but I think that's the constraints that they put on themselves often. Sometimes it's the editors, but I would say it's a lot of times the authors. We had a book come out recently that was Shadow of the Sith that I just reviewed on the channel. That book is all encompassed in the universe. It's all about fixing things and tying together. So he was very much controlled on what he could write, yet it's still a great novel. It's still a really fun book to read. So it can work both ways, where you are really hemmed in and it can work, or you can have all the opportunities and it can work. Blueberry Comics says, oh, it's one book. Stand by Me is the adaptation title. It's written by Stephen King. Thank you, Blueberry Comics. I have not read any of his, but Dave Reese says, glad I found your channel. You are extremely interesting to listen to. Oh, thank you, Dave, and thanks for being here. I'm glad you were able to join us. Carcass 288 says, I don't usually DNF books. The one I've DNF'd recently was The Peculiar Children 3. I enjoyed the first one. The second one was okay, and I just didn't have the motivation to finish it. I've not heard of that trilogy, but I can understand that. Sometimes series do go downhill. That's how I felt with a couple of trilogies that I've read, but some books haven't done that for me. That's how I felt with the Padme trilogy recently. Stand By Me is different from different seasons. I don't know what that is referring to. Joanna says, what's your favorite science fiction, not including tie-ins? So if we're just talking about single novel of science fiction, it's Manta's Gift. If we're talking trilogy, it's the Conqueror's Trilogy. Both of them are by Timothy Zahn. And then if we're talking about overall series of science fiction, it's probably the Saga of the Seven Sons, but the Dune series is up there for me. I just didn't like the most recent ones that I read, but I like Dune, and then I also like the Saga of the Seven Sons. Those are the ones I talk about the most. I've read some other ones that I just didn't love, but those are the ones I talk about the most. Let me see the next. Oh boy, we are getting a lot of comments. This is great. Blue Pig, can you say the name and author of that series again? Sorry, I had to go do something and got back right as you say I'd recommend those ones. I think I was talking about the Saga of the Seven Sons, which is Kevin J. Anderson. I talked about Manta's Gift and Conqueror's Trilogy by Timothy Zahn. I also talked about the Cobra series by Timothy Zahn. And I don't know what else I was referring to. I'm sorry. I can't. Maybe. I'm sorry. I don't remember. Carcass 288 says, yeah, I haven't read any Stephen King books, but I really want to. I actually have Carrie on my TBR. I want to read them in release order. The thing with Stephen King is he has an incredible amount of language, which I don't like reading. And also horror just naturally isn't my genre. There are certain authors I can get behind because I trust them, but there are other authors I'm just like, it's just so weird. And everyone talks about how weird Stephen King is, but everyone also talks about how great an author he is. So I don't know, maybe I'll enjoy it, but I'm not entirely sure. Blueberry Comics says, how did you guys find Jonathan's channel, his first video you watched? Oh, that's a great question. I'm interested. I know which videos have gotten me the most subscribers and the most viewers, so I know what draws most people in, but I'm interested to hear people live what they're thinking. Lydia Jones says, have you read Six of Crows? No. I really want to get into the Grishaverse because I want to be able to watch the adaptation, but I'm not. I promised myself I won't watch the adaptation until I read all the Grishaverse novels. And I'm also, YA is not like a genre I'm like, I need to read it right now. I have YA books on my TBR for July and August, so I will be reading some YA and getting into YA fantasy again. But it's a slower genre for me than adult fantasy or adult sci-fi. So I will get into it eventually, but right now I have not read them. But thank you for being here, Lydia. NP4NE says, did you watch the new Star Trek TV show, Strange New Worlds? So I did not. I intend to watch it eventually. One is because, like, the simple answer is I just didn't have the streaming service because I've been focusing on HBO Max and Disney Plus, and so I haven't had anything else. The second answer is I was not a fan of Discovery or Picard, and so I didn't have too much faith in that series. The third answer is really the Star Trek TV shows recently, because of that, haven't been exciting me, and I'd rather just read the tie-in material because the books for Discovery and the books for Picard have been amazing, even though I haven't liked the series. So I've heard of, if any of them were going to interest me, Strange New Worlds would be the one. So I might get into it, but I will for sure read the Strange New Worlds novels that come out because John Jackson Miller, my good friend, is writing them, or at least writing the first one, if it ever comes out, because they delayed it again. I'm not mad about that at all. Unlikely Ally says, I believe I found Jonathan on a Star Wars book review, one of his earliest videos. Yes, Unlikely Ally. I have like a list, like 5 people who have been here for a long time. Unlikely Ally is one of those people. I'm really happy that he's stuck around. Yeah. Revan127 says, I forgot which one, but my first was a Star Wars video. Most people came to my ranking, my top 10 Star Wars, which is still my #1 video. I put out fantasy, my fantasy videos, which I thought would get more attention, and I think one day will. But Star Wars so far has been what's kicked off for me. And Star Wars is where I'm most knowledgeable when it comes to literature. But of course, I've read a ton of other genres, so I can talk about other stuff. It's just that Star Wars is what's been drawing people in, and I don't want to give up that entirely. Anna says, for sure, some Star Trek review. Yeah, I try to do as many Star Trek books as I can, but Star Trek books just aren't as interesting to a lot of people. They don't get to watch. My Star Wars book reviews tend to get in the multi-hundreds, 500, 600, sometimes even more. Some of my recent ones got over 1,000 views. And then my Star Trek ones barely break 100, like just barely. And it's really disappointing. I want to get more people into Star Trek reading, but there's just not a YouTube community for it. So Carcass288 says, Blueberry Comics, I think my first one was his cons and pros of Legends or canon. Hey, that was a recent video. I'm glad you're still here. Yeah, I've had some recent videos that have popped, and those Legends and canons, I knew they would be successful, and that's why I planned them the way that I did, because I knew they would pop well. The Blue Pig says, I just read the original Thrawn Trilogy, and it was pretty mid in my opinion. Interesting. I really like it because it has just this tone and feeling that I really like reading about. But I get that that's not everyone's tone and that they like to read in their books. So I still think it was really good. You say you don't get the hype. It tells a big epic story. I think Thrawn's an amazing antagonist. I think he's also an amazing protagonist in the canon books, which I think in some ways are better than his Legends books. And then also, Timothy Zahn is great at doing twists and doing mysteries and stuff like that in all his books. Carcass says same. I understand that, Carcass. Blueberry Comics. The first video I watched was his Rebels Creed review. Interesting. Yeah, that one didn't pick up as much, but I'm glad that you found it. Yeah, Rebels Creed is for those of you who don't know, is Daniel Green's, the Goblin, the Goblin Horde. He wrote Breach of Peace, the novella, and then he wrote the full-length novel Rebels Creed, both of which very interesting books. Weren't my cup of tea entirely, but I thought they were very well done, and I'm impressed for a self-published author. These are incredibly well produced. I was very pleased with it. So yeah, Rebels Creed was a great book. Carcassus, it was okay. Unlikely Ally says to Lydia Jones, I loved Six of Crows, then went back to read Shadow and Bone and didn't like it much. Ooh. Which one should I start with? Shadow and Bone or Six of Crows? I don't know which came first in publication. I usually try to read in publication order, but sometimes that doesn't work these days. Oh no, the chat jumped. Let me see where I was. Anth Hooper says, thank you for answering. You have some good points. Well, thank you. I try to make some good points. Revan 1207 says, I really liked the Thrawn trilogy when I read it, but it honestly didn't leave much of an impression on me over time. One of those stories that's good, but didn't quite stick with me. I understand that. I think that there is an element of people, when you read it, will affect it. For instance, people who read it at the time, a lot of times loved it, and then a lot of people who, like, I went to the bookstore the day they announced Thrawn was coming into canon. I had just started getting into Star Wars books. I had read maybe like 10 or 20, like not a lot. And I hadn't even read really Legends. I really just read canon. And they announced in 2016 during Celebration on the big screen Thrawn, and everyone went wild. And everyone was talking about how great Timothy Zahn was and how great it's come to be to have him come back. And I was like, well, if I want to know about Rebels, because I'm a big Rebels fan, I should read about the Thrawn trilogy. So I read the Thrawn trilogy. I went out to the bookstore. I bought like 10 books that day, which I normally don't buy that many. I usually buy 2 or 3, but bought 10 books, and 3 of them were the Thrawn trilogy, and they were oh so good. Oh so good. Kartik Pingle, hello, welcome. Says, I just finished A Test of Courage, and I didn't enjoy it given its maturity level. Do you think that I should bother with the other middle grade novels as I continue through the High Republic? So I would get that. I think that you can skip Race to Crash Point Tower because I think it has the same problems and in some ways worse because there's not as much of a plot there. But there is a follow-up novel to A Test of Courage, which is I'm blanking on the name. Let me look at it real quick. Darn, I forgot it. The other one written by Justina Ireland, not the YA novel, which I thought was bad, but the middle grade novel that she wrote, Mission to Disaster. That's it. Mission to Disaster, I thought was an excellent book, and I think it's one of the best middle grade or YA books that they've produced. So that one's worth it. But middle grade usually suffers because there's just not enough there, and it's usually too kiddie. Blueberry Comics, Different Seasons is a novella collection, including Stand By Me. I bought it as its own book, though. Okay, I'm going to have to look into that. Different Seasons. I'm going to write that down. High Republic hype died after The Fallen Star for me. Yeah, I get that. I didn't love The Fallen Star. And in Phase 3, in Wave 3, the only book I really liked was Mission to Disaster. But I think that the other books, for instance, we have Zoraida Cordova coming in. I loved her YA book that she wrote, which I don't usually love the YA, but she wrote a YA novel a couple years ago that ties into Galaxy's Edge, which I thought was superb. And then she also has some other short stories that she's written that I thought were really good. So I'm excited for that. And for some of the others, George Mann is coming in. He's got a pretty good track record with Star Wars. So The Rising Storm was good. And while I enjoyed The Fallen Star, it was mid for me. I think my first video was Shadow of the Sith. Really enjoyed it, and it's hard to find people who read Star Wars canon and Legends and who will be fair in their criticism of them. Yes, I have some friends and family who detest the canon and refuse to read it, and they call it fan fiction. And then I have some friends who just won't read anything Legends because it has no impact on the story, and I don't get that because it's more Star Wars. It's more Star Wars. I can understand, okay, compartmentalize. This is this timeline. This is this timeline. I'm okay having both. And there's elements of each that I like and don't like, which is what those videos that I made were. But still, I can make content. I can talk about them. if I love a book, I'll discuss it, and if not, it's okay. It's not a big deal if I didn't like a book there, but there's pros and cons on both sides of it, which is why I try to read all the novels. Blueberry Comics says some of King's books are really weird, but he also writes other stuff. Some of his coming of age, for example, are not horror whatsoever. Interesting. Carcass 288 says, do you like Lord of the Rings? I do. I really like Lord of the Rings. I detest Tom Bombadil, but once you skip Tom Bombadil, I love everything else about Lord of the Rings. It's 10 out of 10 for me. Really good. Unluckily, Ally says, Stephen King has some wild and vast amount of stuff. He's mostly known for horror, but he has a fair amount that is off horror, which are usually my favorites. I'll have to look into that. NP for Any says Strange New Worlds is really different from Discovery and Picard. Yeah, I know it's standalone episodes, but I didn't know if the tone, if the style of production was similar, the writing choices that they were making was similar. Revan 1207, but that gives me a little bit more hope. Revan 1207 says, is there any story that hasn't been told yet in Star Wars canon that you really want to see happen? I'd love to see anything related to the beginnings of the Jedi, Sith, and the Republic. Well, Revan, you are going to be really happy with a video I have coming out in a couple weeks. I already recorded it, although it's kind of scheduled for a couple weeks from now. But I have a video of 5 stories I want to see happen and who I think should write those books if they were to tell those stories in the canon. So I have that video coming. I won't give away too much, but I will say there are certain Clone Wars stories I really want to see. But the origins of the Jedi, the Sith, and the Republic are also excellent stories. Anything Old Republic, they need to do. Anna says, Jonathan, go watch Strange New Worlds. It's completely different from Discovery and Picard. It's really good. Okay, that gives me a little bit more hope. Katie Keith says, the Voyager videos got me in and got me reading Trek. I'm happy. Voyager videos or the Voyager novels are what got me into reading Star Trek. I take that back. I read John Jackson Miller's his first 4 books, his Takedown and his Prey trilogy, which are still my favorite Star Trek novels of all time. I read those first, and then I read all the Voyager books, like all of them. And then I went and read the other Star Trek novels and really enjoyed them all. But yes, Voyager is good. Those videos also sadly haven't been incredibly successful, but people are finding them over time, which is good. Let's see the next comment. Unlikely Ally says, I am guilty of not watching your Star Trek videos. I watched a fair smattering of TNG and DS9 decades ago and loved what I saw, but I never delved further since. I'm not blaming anyone for not watching if you're subscribed. Star Trek's not for everyone. I get it. But I'm just sad because there is a significant Star Trek readership out there, and there is none on YouTube. It's barely there. You have Jesse Gender, who does a few Star Trek videos for the books. You also have Bruce Gibson and I forgot the other guy, Dan Gunther, who do some Star Trek book videos, but that's it. Nobody else regularly talks about Star Trek books. And it's really frustrating to me because it's a ripe area because they're so good and there's so many of them. I don't think maybe there is someone out there, but there's probably very few people who have legitimately read all of the books because there's just so many of them. And of course, some of them will be good, some of them will be bad, but that's understandable. Blueberry Comics says, once the channel grows a bit more, have you considered creating a Discord server? I have. Part of the thing is I'm not sure how I would run it. I'm not sure whether I would make it part of a Patreon or not. I'm still exploring how the channel is going to work in the future. So I will look into it, but I do intend to one day. I just don't know how soon it'll be, whether I hit 2,000 or when I hit 10,000 or if I hit that many. I don't know. I hope I keep growing, but we'll see what that happens. We have the Blue Pig. Have you reviewed the Dawn of the Jedi comics? I haven't really talked about comics too much on here. I've read about I'm looking at my comics shelf right now. I've read about 10 or 12 of the 6-issue bind up of the comics. I have not read a crazy amount, partially because it's just not my medium, but partially because I'm just haven't gotten into them yet. And I have not read the Dawn of the Jedi comics. But once I speed through all the rest of the Star Wars books, which I've read about 95% of them, I only have about 10 Star Wars novels left to read. Not many. Blue Pig says, I would be totally down to join a Discord server. Well, I will have to consider it then. I will look into what that entails. Lydia Jones says, starting with Six of Crows is my recommendation. Thank you. I will start there then. Jacob says, what would you consider to be one of the funniest Star Wars books or one that made you laugh? Okay, let's. So Daniel Jose Older, who a lot of his books I don't like, but he wrote the book Last Shot, which was utterly hilarious. I was cracking up throughout this book. I thought it was really good. The humor, the story was fine. It was an amazing story, but it wasn't terrible. Let's see what else. I laughed a lot during Crash of Fate because it's super cheesy. Like, go in knowing you're reading like a cheesy romance, but if you're willing to accept that, boy, is it's funny and really sweet too. Trying to think other novels, Star Wars novels that made me laugh. There's not too many in the Legends line. Anything by Aaron Alston, particularly his Aaron Alston's books made me laugh, and some of Kevin J. Anderson's Star Wars books had some great humor in them too. So I'd have to go with those. Unlikely Ally says, Shadow and Bone was published first. Six of Crows was published later, but is unconnected. It's a wonderful heist story with hard magic and a beautiful friendship set in the same world. Well, that sounds like a Brandon Sanderson book right there. Hard magic system, a heist storyline. Yeah, he would love that. I'll have to look into that. The Netflix series smashed the two together. It was fine. LOL. Interesting. I have not watched it yet, but maybe I'll have to read. I'll read both. I'll read the whole Shadow and Bone trilogy and then read the Six of Crows duology and then watch the show. That's might be what I do. Kartik Pringle says, thanks to the advice. Thank you for being here. I'm happy to give any advice if I can. Jake Walsh says, I'm hoping the new phase of the High Republic can reach the heights of the first. Also, I hope it can have the same level of characters. I think they will. I think they've... The problem with Star Wars under Disney's leadership, under the Disney era, not necessarily Disney themselves, but under this era, was they weren't planned out. That's the problem with the movies. That's the problem with, up till now, the shows. That's the problem with a lot of stuff. But they are showing plans. You know, Filoni and Favreau, they have a plan. The High Republic people have a plan. And I think that the High Republic, the fact that they're making a plan is really good. So I think I have lots of hope. Let's see. Blue Pig says, does her YA novel connect to Blackspire Outpost novel? I'm really wondering what happens there. They kind of left it at a cliffhanger. Yes. So first of all, we need a third book in the Phasma Blackspire trilogy. We need a third book because Delia Dawson is super underrated. Her books are really good, even though they don't always sell the best, but her books are really good. I hope we do get a third. And it was written with the intention of doing a third one day. It just hasn't happened yet because I think that Blackspire didn't sell in the way that they were hoping. But I always promote it on the channel because it's really good. The YA book, Crash of Fate, it has the same locations. It's at a different point in the timeline. It's a bit earlier. It's about a year or two earlier. So you're not seeing the same things happening. But you'll see, like, Doc Ondar is in this. Some of the same shops and people from the novel are in this. This has one character who also showed up in Force Collector, but it's a really walk-on, blink and you miss it type thing. So they're kind of related in that sense. But regarding to Blackspire, it's not super connected, but we do need a sequel. If anyone from Del Rey or Lucasfilm is listening, please give us a sequel to Blackspire and make sure it's Delia Dawson that writes it. Let's see. Nanga Ebko. What Star Wars novel do you think writes the character of Luke Skywalker best? Me personally, it was Courtship of Princess Leia. I don't think so. I'm a big Dave Farland fan. Didn't love Courtship of Princess Leia. Luke didn't stand out to me in that book. For me, Han and Leia stood out because I didn't think he got them at all in that book. But I think that let me give a second real quick. I think that in the Legends line, I think that Timothy Zahn got Luke really well. I think he did him well. I particularly loved Luke in his his duology, the Hand of Thrawn duology, that was a really solid duology, and I think he got Luke best there. And then I think that Luke is okay in the New Jedi Order, and Legacy of the Force, he was fine, but he didn't stand out. Blue Pig says, "Dang, this man spitting facts here." I think that's a compliment. I don't know. I do have a spitting problem, so. Unlikely Ally says, Naga Ekpo, I thought Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy was a perfect progression of Luke from Return of the Jedi. I would say it feels very similar. Yeah, I would say it does feel like a next step, a logical next step. And then in the canon, honestly, Luke had the best example in Shadow of the Sith, but his point of view is barely in it. It's mostly not his. It's mostly the third person omniscient narrator. It's barely Luke at all in that book. So, Ryan Proctor says, favorite Star Trek: The Next Generation episode. I forgot the name of it, but the one where it ships in the time loop and they every time that they start the loop over, they figure it out faster. I think that episode's probably my favorite. Although Best of Both Worlds, the one with the Borg, that one is also just so well done. But those two, I would say, are my favorites. Blue Pig says, generally, I dislike if sci-fi has Earth stuff predominantly in it. Yeah, I can get that. That's why I like Timothy Zahn, where Earth is present in in a lot of his novels, Earth is present, but you really don't see Earth that often. It's usually you spend most of the time somewhere else. So that's why I like him. That's a problem with Star Trek for me. Interesting. I think that a lot of the Star Trek novels just have nothing to do with Earth, which is why I think they really work well. The shows maybe a bit different than that. Anna says, you should check The Gunslinger by Stephen King. It's the first of the Dark Tower series, and it's really popular with fantasy readers. Yeah, again, that's if I was to start Stephen King, I would probably start with the Dark Tower series, because it's not horror, it's fantasy. I don't know what his language is like in that book, but I might be able to get into it, perhaps. Gamma Ray 304. Oh boy, I need to start going faster. What do you recommend for getting into Star Trek? I tried the original series and was too antiquated for me. Any suggestions? Well, if you're talking about TV shows, I would say that The Next Generation, DS9, and Voyager is the golden age of Star Trek for me. And with the books, the post-Nemesis books are good, but you have to have seen the series. So if you're talking about series, I would say watch those. And then if you're talking about the books, anything post-Nemesis, there is a big spreadsheet called the Almighty Trek List Reading List, or Almighty Trek Reading Order List. Look that up, something combination of those words, you'll find it. And it explains where to start, where to read, their recommendations, all that stuff. And the authors do a good job of filling in audiences, but that's